the lights that shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway. Restless nights, coffee houses, clubs and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, I still see your face. Buses roll, distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I'll see you in the morning light.
Alrighty, Monday, September 28th. Thanks for watching What Are the Odds? The newly branded What Are the Odds? With Barnes and Baris. Barnes will be here shortly, as always. Yeah, I was giving you the soothing sounds of the Grammy-considered Boeing band while I crunched something. So we started the Florida poll. All right. We took questions, suggestions. I always got to think that stuff over, folks. But we did ask about the court, and there's some prelim, so we have targets and quotas, like unlike others, many others, unfortunately. And as this stuff started flowing in on Sunday specifically, little pro tip, if you poll Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon, you will get a more secular response. I know, shocking, but that's what happened. So in Florida, it's looking like I'll just say it right now. We have, before I feel perfectly good about this thing, folks, we have maybe another 200 I'd like to collect. I'd like to get over 1,000. The Hispanic sampling, I'd like to oversample a little bit more. You know how I do this. And then, of course, this sample, you would think, or you would know, because you watch the show, so you know. that the first people are always dying to give you their opinions, tend to skew more liberal. Females are more likely than men. You know all of this, right? To jump on a survey, to take surveys immediately. And then you have to kind of let it fill in where you're missing data, right? And that's what we had been doing. However, I will say this. When the ABC Washington Post poll came out, and if you guys read PPD, you saw over the weekend viral story about registrations in Florida. And we could take a look at that. Bottom line is Republicans have narrowed the Florida voter registration gap to a historic low. It's below 200. The Democratic registration advantage is below 200,000 for the first time ever. It is the most narrow since partisan tracking by registrations began in 1972. That was the case, actually. And here, I can pull that up while we're waiting for Barnes, and then we'll get into the poll. And that actually was the case now for a while, because we had reported that it was the most narrow we had seen in years. So you guys know this already, right? I didn't think they could get below 200,000. That is the difference. Okay, so here's a story, and we don't have to go over the whole thing. I'll show you the chart. But Republicans narrow Florida voter registration gap to historic low. In Florida, Republicans have narrowed that to 183,596. That is below, again, for the first time ever, and the slimmest since 72. In August, Republicans added about 58,000 new voters. That's the update. And if you guys watch Inside the Numbers, I opened up the voter file, and I was a little bit shocked about how less Democratic Florida was again. And it wasn't very Democratic and hasn't been that Democratic for a while. And we're going to talk about that. But that's 41% more new registrations than Democrats statewide. So at 5 million and change, Republicans are 35.7% of the total 14 million and change. That compares to about 5.2 for Democratic voters. That is about 37. And I heard Barnes bleep in. Let's go to him in a second here. Just take a look at the chart before I get rid of the big picture. All right. And actually, I could bring in Barnes and get rid of the chart. Make sure he's all set up. I'll give him a second. But you can see the edge narrowing here as time goes on. Look, when Trump won, the Democratic advantage was 330,500. When Barack Obama barely held on with less than 70,000 votes in Florida, it was about 560,000. When he won by 2 points, it was 694,000. And when Bush won against Kerry, it was about 37,000 more than Trump. It was when Trump won in 2016. And then you go back, folks, and you look at like 2000, for instance, right? We're talking about 500 votes and change. That was 380,000. So overall, the bottom line is the idea that whites are bleeding out of the Democratic Party is just not backed up anymore. It's archaic, it's superficial, it's outdated. This is simply new registrations. Republicans are doing better. And let's bring in Robert before we talk about this poll, because there he is. How we doing, Robert? How's it going, buddy?
Good.
Yeah, I was just talking. You could hear me, right? I was just talking about Florida and the registration changes in Florida over, this new month updated. And on Inside the Numbers last week, I did it live. And then I was like, wait a minute. And I was looking at it and I'm like, wait a second. That's less than it was before. What's going on, right? And then when I saw the August 31st update, that's what happened. I didn't think they could get below 200,000, Robert, but they did. So when I was looking at that ABC Washington Post poll, I saw it was R+4. I thought it was kind of rosy for Trump. I was like, it's a presidential election. 18, for those who don't know, 18 was R+5. 16 was R+1 or 2, So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But then we started to poll it, and I sent you the early prelim. That was a very Democratic raw sample, right? And then you saw 20% Protestant, a huge number of people who have no religion. I mean, it's just not a Republican-friendly sample that was coming in when I showed that to you. And Trump was competitive. It was competitive. So I was like, oh my God, Florida is going to be not. It's, like I've been saying, fundamentally, I think the issues are with the pollsters, Robert. So now that we updated and uploaded to Market Site some prelim, we got about 200 and change that I want to collect, but the remaining quotas are going to be more Trump friendly anyway, because I got to iron out what you saw over the weekend, that it was like 2 female, too educated, too non-religious, and then what was religious was Catholic, and Trump is actually carrying the Catholic vote. So in Florida, which is pretty significant. I mean, I can give you guys that margin if you want, but I'm like stunned by that, Robert. I really thought it would be roughly even, but it's not, man. He's winning 52% of the Catholic vote. Biden's mired in the low 40s, not even 40. And Protestants are, of course, going for Trump, by at least 10 points. So those undecideds are going to break, and they're going to put him in like the mid to upper, around 60%. That's what it's looking like. And then, of course, Jewish, which is 4%. That's going for Biden big, 62.3, 62.4. But again, the biggest groups, religious groups in Florida, are first Protestants, which are almost half of the vote, about half of the vote, and then Catholics, which are about a quarter of the vote. And Trump is romping him right now with Catholics, which, again, going to your tweet, which is why I wanted to time bringing you in. What did they miss, Robert? What did they miss?
So, yeah, I think for folks out there, the impact of the SCOTUS choice, I was telling some some betting observers, betting market reporters today, that for me, but prior to the choice, the SCOTUS choice, and if there had been no SCOTUS choice at all, or if the SCOTUS choice had been someone like Legault or some other people, I was not changing my odds, or I was increasing Trump's odds. This choice, I have pulled all bets for the time being, and I'm in a wait and watch mode. Because I was telling him, I was like, this is a crazy presidential election to try to forecast. Congressional election, the same. We're experiencing, all the historical metrics favor Trump. There's two things that are completely ahistorical about this election, and to a certain degree, there's a third, which is just Trump. Trump he's
hard, man.
Well, there's no history of a guy completely outside of the political process getting elected president, least of all running for re-election for president. So we don't have a clean historical precedent from that perspective. But the two big ones, of course, we're going along with the lockdown, and then the net effect of that lockdown. That's unprecedented. We've never had anything like that in the history of American politics, period, least of all during a presidential election. That completely reversed the economic numbers, at least temporarily, and had massive societal impact. And then, we've dealt with riots and looting and race disputes and all that. That's, while it's at a uniquely high level, it's not unprecedented. It's not unparalleled. But having a Supreme Court choice in the middle 1 week before Election Day, that, folks, is unheard of. Yes, there's been Supreme Court nomination disputes over time in election years, but never right before Election Day. And least of all, where you're having at least what is going to be the perception of a strong conservative replacing a strong liberal, number one, and number two, doing so when they can be the fifth vote on the Supreme Court on a whole bunch of issues. The closest you would get to that, even happening, period, really is a little bit Kavanaugh, because they thought Kavanaugh was replacing Kennedy, not realizing that Roberts would just replace Kennedy instead. We saw what happened in Kavanaugh. And so though I think I'll explain why I think that's going to go a different direction here. It's going to be just as intense, but not personal. I don't think.
I don't either. I think. Go ahead.
Oh, and then the other one is just Bork. Bork was the last real conservative to replace a moderate liberal that they thought was going to flip the majority of the court. So the last two times we've had anything like this in the modern era, the net effect of it has been extremely controversial confirmation hearings that have been fiercely partisan and deeply divided, where one failed and the other one nearly failed to win. So to have that now, I don't think it's going to show up in the polling surveys for several weeks, because most people, it's just, I saw Barrett, she's got a big family. Okay. That's going to be about it. It's not going to resonate. The controversial component, the more popular part of Barrett will start off, I think, more popular than I think she'll turn out, because all people will mostly hear, Democrats will be against her, but your independents will have mostly heard at this point just she's a family lady. People say she's smart, that's and conservative, but that's expected. The real fight is yet to come, I believe, and so that's why I'm in a wait and watch mode. And the second component is Barrett presents unique risk
Yeah.
to Trump.
Yeah.
That the conservatives are completely unprepared for. They're completely in denial about this. They're in complete la land. It's partially a function of the fact that conservative lawyers are terrified to question anyone the Federalist Society promotes. But it's so bad. They remind me of Bork's people. Bork was sitting there sipping whiskey with his son and the president in the White House just about 2 hours after his nomination, and they thought it was going to be a breeze. Everybody involved, Ted Olson, other people, admitted they had no clue what was coming.
What was coming? Yeah.
Shows you how politically inept they were. You're going to replace Lewis Powell with one of the most controversial conservative nominees in history, and the Democrats just won the Senate, and you think nothing's coming? I mean, it's just, that shows you how dumb most Republican political people are, folks.
And you've been taking a bit of a beating here, Robert, because I've been seeing on my Twitter feed everything from them saying you're anti-Catholic to look, I think, like, let me just stop something here. Lagoa is Catholic. Robert is not anti-Catholic. Lagoa is Catholic. What he was saying is, don't look at me. This is what they are going to do. So for you not to read the Daily Beast because you're not a left-winger is a little bit putting yourself in the dark and in an echo chamber, and it's hard for you to be able to figure out where your
here's the example.
Are.
Rasmussen's pull out this morning. All the Republicans think it's going to be easy for her to get confirmation.
Yeah.
People responding to me on Twitter and other places, oh, this is going to be a breeze. This is all going to be positive. Also, it's a reminder of, it's amazing to me how much Republicans still have not figured out that George W. Bush's coalition was rejected.
Yeah.
They still believe in it. I mean, the party that the sort of Republican political class,
and they want it back, Robert. They want it back.
Yes, they do. That's why. And they love Barrett, by the way. That group of people love Barrett. George Conway loves Barrett. The Democratic lawyer who helped lead the impeachment effort. He loves Barrett. So that Barrett's an establishment pick. Now, that may protect her for the nomination process because people like Romney likely back her. The Koch family foundation's pouring in tons of cash. The corporatists are pouring in tons of cash. The elite types are writing articles in the New York Times, even liberal elite types. But don't expect that to translate to the Senate, in my view. I think that definitely not on the Democratic side. That's mostly coveted for the Romneys of the world to vote for. But here's the prop. So if we step back from context, one, is there a likelihood of a fierce confirmation contest? Everything in recent history for the last 30 years says absolutely this is going to be deeply contested, not that it's going to be some easy roll. So Republicans what happened is they convinced themselves that she didn't have any problems, so much so that they convinced themselves that she couldn't be contested. And then if they did try to contest, it would just be an anti-Catholic personal smear like Kavanaugh, and that they would breeze through on that. Not remembering that before Kavanaugh, there was Bork. And if you have a Bork record, and I kept trying to tell my Republican friends, there's a reason why Democrats were silent all last week. Everybody knew or believed that Barrett was going to be the pick, and they were saying almost nothing. That meant that they were sitting in wait, knowing that for the last 3 years, by the way, this is why before Trump, nobody put out a list of who they would pick. It's because the other side gets to spend years researching you,
digging through every decision. Just to give a baseline, I'll throw out a little teaser. And when I say we have a couple hundred more responses at this point, we know what each group is shaping out. We just need to make sure each group is represented correctly. Nationally, Robert, I get what ABC and Langer Research found. I get that. We did not find the way. First of all, Langer Research folks, let me just say something. They committed a cardinal sin. When they asked about Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, they worded the question differently. And then they worded this one, which was very good. I mean, really, I would never do what they did. So I actually worded the question the way they worded it for Barack Obama, which is, and just let me read it because I'm stunned by a few of these results. Florida's different though. Florida is more pro-Trump. It seems to just like Trump more, right? I really believe his approval, everything, trust on issues. We said, and just to give a baseline, because I'm with you on this, watching whether or not this sours over time, right? So this is our baseline right now, roughly. And the question was, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died last week, creating a vacancy on the court. President Donald J. Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett to fill that vacancy. Do you believe the U.S. Senate should hold hearings and vote on whether to confirm Judge Barrett or not hold hearings and block her nomination, leaving the vacancy to be filled by the winners of the election? That is how they asked basically the first one. And then they shifted this one where, like, do you think Trump should get this nominee or do you think you should have a say? Well,
yeah,
I mean, come on. And then they used real forceful words like block Merrick Garland, and they didn't use that here. So just such cornballs. But unbelievably, Robert, it was in Florida so far right now, prelim, with 958 sample size. It's 53.9 should hold hearings. Should not is 34.9. I was like, what? I thought it was going to be a lot on partisan votes. You know what it is, man? It's women. You tell them the name Amy Coney Barrett. And what I'm saying is, though, I don't think it's going to help appeal electorally. Maybe it does, and I'm wrong. I'm just saying that this is initial knee-jerk reaction. Women are like, give the woman a hearing. Well, wait a little bit and wait until people dig in, right? And that's what I'm thinking myself.
Correct. And the way I think of it is like there's only twice since 2015, really, that I've recommended shorting. Actually, 3 times I've recommended shorting Trump. And the first one was when in 2016, he was going to be going into Utah and Wisconsin. I knew during the Republican primary process, and I recommended people shorting Trump because I thought it, and also before Iowa, I recommended people shorting Trump because those were strong religious church conservative voters where he didn't do well. But once he got elected, I'd never recommended shorting Trump until the lockdowns. And the initial polling responses said I was wrong, and people were being critical, saying, no, see, this is great. The lockdowns are helping Trump. His job approval is going up. And I told people to short Trump when he was at about 65% during that time period. I said he should be around 35%, wait until he gets back there and then buy again. Well, within after that hagiography period faded and people started feeling the effect of the lockdown, that's when all of a sudden his numbers dropped, and he actually did drop to about 30% as I forecast. Then I recommended buying him once the lockdown started lifting. So this is the second time I've said hold on Trump since he's been elected. And the last time ended up accurate, and it's similar, I think. You're going to see a hagiography of favorable data initially because the criticisms aren't seeping in yet. And I think this is deliberate. I think Democrats want to wait to really unleash. They want to plant some seeds, but they're really going to unleash in the 2 weeks in October. And just hammer. Plus, they already knew they had the tax story dropping probably. So, but given that was clearly coordinated. So
as a lawyer, can we go over that later? I got a lot of requests for that because you're a lawyer, and people are kind of stupid and they don't know the tax code, Robert. I mean, right? We'll go over that later, though. Go ahead. I just wanted to tell you.
God bless them. People like Molly Hemingway. The weakness in the Republican Party is that the institutional people who control it and have power in it and are part of the political class and the media class still think the W coalition is popular.
Yeah.
So they think that a combination of country club republicanism and church republicanism works. Even my friend Sean Trendy was of this inclination because he thought Scott Walker would win over blue collar voters, not realizing that's not who he was really winning in Wisconsin. He was winning Fox River Valley voters, not the people in the North and the West you have to win presidentially. There is no blue collar coalition for the W mantra after 2004. He killed it. It's done, finished. It's in the dead.
It's never coming back. It's never coming back, folks. If Trump loses, they'll be in the wilderness, Robert, until they fix themselves.
The other things they didn't realize is the Electoral College blue wall that Democrats were talking about emerged because of the W coalition.
That's right.
W coalition created a deficit and disadvantage in the Electoral College. Compare the national vote of W in 2004 to the Electoral College. You'll see he underperformed in a majority of the Electoral College. He underperformed in Iowa, underperformed in Minnesota, underperformed in Wisconsin, underperformed in Michigan, underperformed. He performed just a par in Ohio, underperformed in Maine, underperformed in New Hampshire. That's the reality. And in the 2 states that he overperformed in relative to today no longer hold because Arizona and Nevada are no longer as white as and non-Hispanic as they were in 2004, 16 years ago. The Latino vote has doubled its share of the vote in those 2 states, folks. So you can't bank on the W coalition there either. The W coalition, if you won the popular vote with the W vote, would barely break 200 electoral votes today. That's how bad a position it is in. And but the Republicans are the ones that nominated McCain, that nominated Romney, that pushed Barrett. I believe, look, if Trump made a calculated gamble for some reason, that'd be one thing. This is a massive gamble Barrett pick. Aside from my own political disagreement with it, that's irrelevant for my betting analysis. Folks, I bet on Bill Clinton. I bet on Barack Obama. When it comes to my bets, there's no partisan preferences.
You bet on who's going to make you money.
Exactly. I'm cheering on Bob's Bucks. That's about it. I don't care about either party, frankly, when I have a bet on. So as to the bet, but there was the second reason I had skepticism of Barrett was because I thought she was a big gamble. And it seems to me, I think Trump was sold on picking Barrett, pretending that she was the least of the gamble. And just because I'm watching all these Republicans respond, and most Republicans on social media are pretending that some far left lunatic on social media is defining how Democrats are going to attack Barrett. They're not going to attack Barrett based on her being a Catholic. There's a majority of the Supreme Court is Catholic.
It'll be abortion and all that.
Yeah,
stuff,
even more so, it'll be too. And to give some folks some political context, electoral context, the culture war. The problem with the reason why W's coalition was at a disadvantage is because evangelicals and observant, politically active Catholics are underrepresented in the Electoral College. It's the reason why. So 2004 is a great metric to look at 2 things. One, to look at the anti-war vote to show where W went down from 2000 to 2004. But the second is it was really the first big culture war election presidentially as well. That's when the suburbs started to move Democratic. People attributed it to Obama. In fact, it started in 2004. Places like the Twin Cities, places like outside of in Chester and Delaware and Montgomery County. Some of those counties were already trending Democratic compared to their 2000 baseline, and definitely compared to their 1990s baseline, 1980s baseline. But on top of that, the other factor is the culture. Because of that, and we'll go back. We've only have one electoral example of a eve of election Supreme Court nomination that was controversial. Fortunately for us, it was Kavanaugh in 2018. But here's what people should look at, and I agree with you, by the way. When just the Supreme Court is on the ballot without there being a controversial nominee in front of them, that has been a net favoritism towards Republicans in the pro-life vote.
It has in the past, yeah,
absolutely. Now, but here's the difference: is now we have a live candidate, live controversy. Then the ball game can change. And here's why I thought Kavanaugh helped Republicans in 2018 for the most part. I'll go through where I thought it did not. Whereas a lot of those dynamics are flipped in 2020. In 2018, it was the Democrats who had the enthusiasm edge going in prior to Kavanaugh. So because Democrats, and so what Kavanaugh did is he excited both sides, but it disproportionately benefited Republicans because they were the ones who went into the follow-up to October 2018 with a deficit in terms of excitement of their voter base. In 2020, it's reverse. Folks, Trump doesn't need to squeeze any more juice out of his supporters. His supporters are at the max of enthusiasm.
Yeah, so no kidding. We're going to talk about that in a second.
Exactly. Nominating Barrett cannot boost his support any more than it's already at. On the other hand, Biden was at record low levels of enthusiasm. Young voters, millennial voters, Zoomer voters, liberal voters, minority voters were at record low on the Democratic side. We're at record low levels of interest. The gap was 30, 40 points. That's how you go from Richard's poll, from Trump winning by 8 amongst extremely enthusiastic voters to losing by 6 if everybody votes. So my biggest problem out of the gate with Barrett was that Barrett was sufficiently controversial that the net effect of her was going to be, even though no doubt she'll enthuse religious conservatives, it's just they were already enthused, folks. They were already ready to back up Trump, already ready to defend Trump. The problem is the people that were not enthused at all. Like, this is where Ben Shapiro's completely wrong. He's pretending we're operating in a vacuum. We're not. 2020
never are
had an enthusiasm edge, and especially Trump had a massive enthusiasm edge. So any spike in enthusiasm, if it's equally distributed amongst partisans, which this will be if I'm right about how Barrett's going to play out, disproportionately benefits Democrats, whereas in 2018, disproportionately benefited Republicans. The second aspect of this is the culture war is good for Republicans in the Senate when the Senate map looks a certain way. So 2018, look at where the contested seats were. Kavanaugh
this is not a great map. This is not a great map for Republicans.
Completely. In 2018, your battlegrounds are Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota, and then to lesser degrees, Arizona and Florida. All of those states, Arizona and Florida, are about dead even. Like, for example, if you were to do a poll question of pretend there's a referendum on the ballot, and would you support banning abortion in the state except in cases of rape, incest, and the life of the mother? And you got, say, a national number. The Florida and Arizona would probably be very close to whatever the national number is, maybe even a little more pro-life. North Dakota and Indiana and Missouri would be double digits pro-life. Now let's flip, and even here 2018 is a bit of a preview for this. Let's look at how the northern working class responded to the degree to which Kavanaugh had any impact on them. Well, folks, the Republicans got crushed in the House in Michigan, crushed in the House in Pennsylvania, crushed in the House in New Hampshire and Maine. Didn't make many gains, but sort of drew to a tie or draw in Wisconsin, which is consistent with Wisconsin. Wisconsin probably leans a little pro-choice, but not by a big margin. Minnesota
I'd agree.
A little pro-choice, but not by a big margin. Iowa's also probably leans just a tad bit pro-choice, but also big evangelical vote there, so it balances it out. So when we look at how did the cultural war of Kavanaugh work in 2018, there was a different conditions in terms of excitement, and there was a different Senate map that made it more likely to benefit Republicans and Democrats. But to the degree we play it out in the swing states for 2020, it means it's probably going to battle to a draw in Florida and Arizona. I don't think we'll have a big impact in either one of those states. But in the northern working class, Democrats swept the governorships in most of those in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin and Minnesota. They swept the Senate seats that were up for grabs in all 4 states. They made major House inroads in all except Minnesota, which flipped back and forth. And then remember in Iowa, they ultimately, like I said, it's real close. They ultimately netted out gains out of Iowa's House seats. So
they did.
So if we go back to 2004 and look at how people responded to W in the culture war, we look at the 2018 Kavanaugh vote. If Barrett was just a culture war issue, and I think she's unfortunately more than that, but if she was just a culture war issue and it does become very controversial, it's a net negative for Trump for 2 reasons. One, the enthusiasm gap may shrink, but I don't think we'll start to see that for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks in the poll. And when it will show up is if we start seeing a reversal of this great voter registration trend, that's where we'll start to see it. And
that could be calamitous.
Yes. So if we see it there, that'll be the place to monitor it. The other place to monitor it is in self-reported extreme enthusiasm in polls and social media activity. Also look at Democratic advertising. To give you an idea how great this was going before Barrett for Trump, Biden was spending money on rural black radio trying to convince black voters to vote Democrat in the South. That gives you an idea of how bad their enthusiasm problem is.
He's got a problem in Florida, too. He does.
Oh, no doubt.
I'll show you.
Florida was perfectly scripted for Trump's campaign, the way he's campaigning. It has an above-average number of populist working-class whites in the northern part of the Panhandle state and in the what I call Burt Reynolds Gator Country in the center.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. That's a great name for it. I love that.
A bunch of older Midwestern Catholics from the same part of the country that Trump did so well in 2016, upstate New York, and then Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Minnesota, all those places. They usually the ones that don't, a few of the Wisconsinites and Minnesotans will retire to Arizona. Even a few, they stopped doing it, but they used to also retire some in Vegas. That's what used to help the Republican edge here. But the rest traveled to Florida. So a lot of your Catholics, white Catholics, non-Hispanic Catholics out of Florida are going to be a group that should trend Trump if things are going well. And I think for them, that group, like Florida and Arizona, are not likely to be negatively impacted, in my view, by Barrett, except for the enthusiasm issue. That will be the issue to monitor because this was such a wonderful gap. My view is if he doesn't nominate Barrett, this was going to be money in the bank my bet, for me betting on him. And I thought he was going to win. I thought Republicans would hold the Senate. I thought they had even an outside shot at picking off some upsets, both in the Senate and in the House, so that the House margin would be at least much closer if they didn't come and take it back. Now, all of that's back up for grabs, in my view, because we have an unprecedented, unparalleled event. I'm seeing all the signs of Democrats being very well prepared to take on Barrett. And I'm seeing all the signs of Republicans living in la-la land and being delusional about this. The number of people I'm saying, oh, this is going to be a breeze, this is no problem. I was on last night with Viva Fry and a bunch of the conservative types that are on there. They're like, why are you even talking about Barrett? This is a done deal. It's finished. She's confirmed. No problem. There'll be no controversy. This will just be a big winner. It's like, wow. So the last 30 years skipped Republicans.
And Robert, but it has, though. Look, like, this is why I put this on the board here so people can see it. You brought up Shapiro, and I'm not digging at him. I'm just saying he is a great example of what you're talking about. All right. Look at this. Wasn't even close. We gave people the definition of judicial activism versus judicial restraint. And they're so inept, truthfully, at making these arguments. They can't capitalize on a margin like this, Robert. Exactly. 64% chose judicial restraint. So the question was, do you believe the U.S. Supreme Court should practice, quote, in quotes, judicial restraint and base decisions on deference to legal precedent and the law as it is written? Or should justices, and this is shortened here, so I put a different, but I'll read you the whole thing. Or should justices practice judicial activism and base decisions on their preferred or desired outcome on fairness, regardless of the law as it is written? And it didn't fit there, so I had to shorten it. Or the principles of fairness. So in other words, if sometimes the law doesn't keep up, or what, that's the view. I can't believe it. Look at it by party here. 20% of Democrats said judicial activism in Florida. It wasn't even close, of course, with Republicans, and independents, 57% sided with Republicans. This is like,
well, that's why
messaging ineptness. I don't know, man.
Yeah,
Brandon,
that was the utility of someone like, for folks out there, for a Lagoa, was that this would be the defining issue politically.
Right. Yeah.
With Barrett, what they're going to do is highlight her areas of activism,
and Democrats are great at that. They really are.
It's because she yipped so much, and frankly, I mean, in my view, and by here when I say bad decisions, I don't mean legally. I mean bad decisions politically. I mean that she made decisions that politically you can do what Ted Kennedy did to Bork. So to give examples, I mean, it's astounding to me that after Trump had spent 4 years muting the issue of pre-existing conditions, reducing the effect of that issue. In 2018, the Democratic House, that's all they ran on, and the 80% of their ads were based on that, and that's why they won. In large part, it was the number one issue was you have to vote Democrat in order to make sure that you can get health insurance for your pre-existing conditions. This is because 1 out of 3 Americans has a pre-existing condition when they need to get and lose insurance at some point along that line. So, as you know, I mean, the pre-existing conditions issue was a dream issue.
Defining, yeah, because Paul Ryan and John McCain, and by Paul Ryan, what I mean by that, folks, is for those who don't know what happened behind the scenes. I mean, you cannot promise voters you're going to do something for 7 years, capitalize, make political gains based on that promise, and then stab a knife in their, put a knife in their back. You can't betray them like that. It doesn't matter what the polls say. Now it's 52-48 support Obamacare. That doesn't matter. It's the base that you get out that you've been promising for 7 years. And he looked them in the eye with the equivalent of Hannity, that Hannity interview. And we got a plan. We have a consensus. They had no consensus. He was lying, and voters are not stupid. And then when McCain did the thumbs down, it's impossible to argue against a hypothetical. So and by the way, who was that? I always forget his name, but he nailed it. He wrote an article. He was defeated in Minnesota, I think. And he wrote an article and he said, they did this to us because it was impossible for us to say that's not true. And because if we would have passed it, you'd know that's not true.
Exactly. For people to understand the context of what Richard's talking about to the degree they don't know, the Obamacare reform plan was in fact repeal and replace. And as part of it, if it had passed, it continued to protect access to insurance for people with pre-existing conditions. So it would have completely ended that issue for Democrats to raise. By failing to repeal and replace it, because Paul Ryan lied, is what Richard's talking about to the world about what votes they had for it. And then John McCain famously did his walk up and, with his thumb, like it's a big deal. This is the schmuck who ran against Obamacare twice. Well, I mean, what a liar and a fraud.
How could you have any respect? Look, when you're on the right or the left, how could you have any respect for this man? I don't care about his service record. That was like a lifetime ago when you lie to people like that.
Exactly. Same way I view John Lewis. Yes, he was a great civil rights hero 50 years before. That did not give him immunity to lie about people the rest of his life.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And the same is true with John McCain. And well, hey, you can see how much the system really respects people that are veterans. Brian Kolfage is a triple amputee, one of the few people to survive, and they're trying to put him in prison for 8 to 10 years, and nobody on the left or right is coming to his defense. So save me the nonsense about, it's his service record.
Right. Give me a break.
That's not
what they did with Michael Flynn. Come on, Robert. Look what they did with Michael Flynn. 3 years, 3 decades, of service to his country. And they absolutely, they framed the guy. They used him. We know now it's over, guys. It's over. The text messages are out. I can't believe, it stinks that the media is this corrupt, but it should be, considering the Trump administration was dominated for 2-3 years with this fraud, this hoax, this con. I can't believe that it doesn't at least get bare bones outside of the Federalist coverage. Even Fox News, who, by the way, they ran with that con too. All right, I'm sick of Britt Hume and Brett Baer and all the rest of them trying to pretend like they're any better. They're actually worse in my eyes because they pretend to be something they're not. And I always, use an example like the Hallmark Channel, the cable news. You are not.
Exactly. And for folks out there, why do Democrats pick much better Supreme Court nominees in the sense of their nominees are loyal to what they were put on the bench to do? It's because there is no Federalist Society on the left. So one upside is when a Democratic nominee gets up, they'll actually get vetted internally on the Democratic side. They'll raise questions, they'll challenge, they'll dispute, they'll controvert, they'll shoot down questionable candidates, etc. That's how that system works. That's why they're so much more successful. Problem on the Republican side is Fox would not put on a single person who had any criticism of Barrett while she was under consideration, knowing that Trump right now is only listening to Fox. He can occasionally tunes into One American News Network, occasionally tunes into Twitter. For the most part, if it's not on Fox, Trump doesn't know it exists, folks. It's unfortunate, but you can see that in the way that if Twitter makes it a big issue, suddenly Trump will be on an issue. Well, the issue was there for a year before. It's only because suddenly Tucker covers it that Trump is aware of it. It's because everybody in his orbit otherwise keeps him from getting any access to any information. And so he thought Barrett was going to be highly successful because everybody on Fox said she would be. Nobody laid out what the potential criticisms would be. I was the only one and getting attacked left and right by people in the institutional right for doing so. And my view was that's counterproductive, folks. You're better off with this internal debate first before you get ambushed with the external debate. The left has figured this out over the last 30 years. They figured this out when back in the 60s, they had some nominees go sideways on them. Since then, they have made sure they're and part of their vetting process is not having a monopolistic Federalist Society to make sure that people get internally vetted. If I was on the left, I would have been heard and listened to, and they would have not nominated a left-wing version of Barrett. They'd have been like, okay, problem, scratch that one. Let's go to candidate number 2. On the right, no influence because you're not allowed to have a dissident voice. If you're Harmeet Dillon, you're going to end your political ambitions if you speak out. That's why she's out there now. Only after Barrett gets nominated, suddenly Harmeet Dillon feel a need to justify him. And she's having to reach.
Know that how it works. I think people should know how that works. Your contributorship is on the line when you step out of I like Harmeet, but
I do. I'm a big fan. That's why I'm not making it. I haven't called her out on it or anything like that because I want her to be in a position of political influence.
Absolutely. Right. If you like her.
Lawyer, and she didn't defend Barrett at all until after the choice had been made. So I understand, but what I'm pointing out to the right and large is this is a institutional weakness, folks. Not being able to meaningfully vet candidates Look, it was similar to the lockdown. When I was out there saying the lockdown is going to be bad for Trump, and I was getting huge pushback from the Republican establishment types, and then they said, look, the polls are showing Trump's doing great, record-setting job approval after he agreed to put Fauci in charge. How long did that last, folks?
Yeah.
He lost 50% of his market value in the betting markets. He went from a 2/3 favorite to a 1/3 to a 2/3 underdog.
I got to tell you, Robert, I had a lot of people who would, they just, again, one of those things where you can't speak out. But during that, and, we talked about it. We were emailing each other back. I'm like, look, Robert, his approval rating is not this high. They're full of crap. They're trying to get him to do this. I mean, I'm polling the same time. It's at 45%. I mean, like, where do they get the extra 4 and 5% from? I mean, he's a 45% president.
And I think Barrett is one big, massive trap. And I think it's, and here's like, what happened for folks, I think, the other thing is conservatives are sort of have been in a quiet echo chamber to a certain degree. They haven't fully appreciated how Obamacare has changed in public perception. Democrats, because the repeal and replace failed, it opened the door for Democrats to redefine Obamacare as really just one issue, as just access to health care for people with pre-existing conditions. I mean, if I was in one of those swing districts in 2018, the only ad I saw almost the entire campaign was pre-existing conditions. And when I first saw that, I was like, that can't be that solely persuasive. That seems like an esoteric thing. And I knew that
but it is.
It is. And then I dug into it. I was like, oh, wow. When everybody knows somebody that has pre-existing conditions. Everybody knows somebody that lost their health insurance while they had one of those pre-existing conditions. That's the problem, that our health market space has been so, because lifetime employment ended and it required people to constantly transition between jobs, which healthcare being employer dependent, it created a phenomenon where this is a huge concern. Now, I knew that it was a highlighted concern just because Trump was all over it since 2015. He would always go out of his way to say, I will guarantee protection against you losing coverage for pre-existing conditions. He would volunteer this in any interview, he would volunteer it. But so folks, Obamacare has become redefined that way. And why is that significant? Barrett was the only one on his list of 22 people who had gone out and publicly yipped and using Bork-like language about all of this being unconstitutional. And there's arguments. I'm in favor of the unconstitutionality arguments of large parts of Obamacare. However, I'm not dumb enough to think that that's politically popular right now as it relates to pre-existing conditions. It's not. Of course, what were the Sunday talking points for them? Every single Democrat on the Sunday morning talk shows: pre-existing conditions, pre-existing conditions, pre-existing conditions. Yeah, they were. An issue that Trump had managed to bury is now suddenly resuscitated. And there's already TV advertising in swing states on the issue. So an issue that Trump had managed to basically bury, that because here's the other place to watch in the polls, see if healthcare starts to rise as an issue of importance. If it does, because here's the biggest, to give the 180 view, biggest problem with Barrett, from a political perspective, from a political risk perspective, if you go down Richard's list of where Trump has a disadvantage to Biden, which issues, Barrett has decisions that Democrats can highlight on every single one, on the environment, on healthcare, on coronavirus, on employment, on race relations, on criminal justice reform, quote unquote, and on any of those kind of issues that are the best issues for Biden, they can pick one and highlight for a day or two, dominate the news cycle for a day or two. And it reintroduces the economic issues so part one is the culture war is not very popular in the swing states for Republicans. That's problem one. Problem two is they're going to attack her economically like they attacked Bork. They're going to go at her on pre-existing conditions. They're going to go at her on employment decisions. They're going to go at her on disability decisions. They're going to go on her, and then they'll add to it statements she's made on sexual assault cases, statements she's made on people arrested for driving while black, statements she's made on how you have no right to vote. You have a right to own a gun, but not a right to vote, not a right to sit on a jury. They're going to have so they'll do the no confirmation until inauguration.
That's perfect for the establishment conservative. Now you can see why they love her so much. Yeah. Serious, right?
It's a W nominee, and that's the other reason why they're so clueless. They're like, "What? That's unpopular."
We'll just
Oh,
have to look and see how, and see how it goes. I did want to ask you a question somebody asked, because I think it's a valid question, and I'll let you respond. He's like asking me. I'm like, I'm not going to answer for Robert. I'll ask him because he can answer for himself. He's a big boy. And let me just say this, though, just so people know what's up here. So, look, I wouldn't be surprised. Like I was saying before, when you look at the registration data, and I just saw there was some new stuff out of Pennsylvania too, Robert. It's positive for the Republican Party. But again, this is all kind of lags a little. But when I saw
it was going the best ever. I mean, that's
why nobody's talking about it except for us.
Exactly. And so it might be, in fact, finally, I'll give him credit. My harassment and trolling of Nate Cohn finally paid off. I don't know if you've noticed, for the last 10 days now, he has been putting out these internal data on what the 2016, so he reports, if only the people in 2016 voted, here's what the margin is.
Robert,
he's also putting out registration, party identification. He suddenly discovered all of it.
Texas, Georgia, Iowa, they're all his own data is Trump +8 almost across the board. And he is trying to tell everybody that there will be 30 million more people who come out and vote. Those people are going to break at least 80%, 75% for Joe Biden. And then that's what's going to undo what happened in 2016. Folks, if that happens, you just can count me as skeptical that they didn't just have some like widespread plan to pull some crap, because that would be the first time in the history of our country that something like that would ever happen. I mean, it's ludicrous to think so. From 2000 to 2004, Democrats did a great job getting other voters out. They didn't vote for John Kerry, 75%. I mean, these are, at least like Robert said, he's putting it out now, but it's ludicrous to believe that, that is going to shift, that there's going to be so many more voters. It's going to erase Trump's 8-point lead in each of those 3 states. That's a lot of votes, guys. Basic math. It's a lot of votes,
And I think the only thing that now makes that, my concern with Barrett is that in certain states, there'll be geographic divide. In certain states, that there's a higher risk of that occurring now than before. I still don't think we'll get anywhere near what the numbers they're talking about, but we may get closer to those numbers if Barrett is as big if the Democrats if Democrats do to her what Kennedy did to Bork, then there is now a risk of that occurring that I put it like a 1 in 3 risk of occurring. Whereas before that, in my view, there was a 5% risk of that occurring or less. In other words, it had to be as Richard's talking about, it would have to be an extreme outlier to have some crazy turnout like that.
Would be
now,
great.
When there's a Supreme Court bid that may change the entire direction of the court, and you manage to not only light a fire under the culture war, but also light a fire under the old economic issues, where and for folks that didn't monitor it, contrary to what a lot of the media said, the big swing vote, and the so-called political analysts, polling analysts said, the big swing group was a lot of your suburban voters just voted consistent with in 2018 what they did in 2016. Now that flipped a lot of seats, but all they did was they just realigned, as Richard's been talking about. What cost the Republicans the House and the governorships in the Midwest was working class voters that, like Trump, double-digit going the other way.
Even in rural areas.
This is a good example to people. Which congressional districts did Democrats overperform in the most in the entire country? Which state? West Virginia. So that, they didn't win, so nobody paid attention, but Democrats ran 20 to 25 points ahead of Hillary's margin in congressional seats in West Virginia. That gives you a clue. In other words, there's the working class voter who was uncomfortable with Ryanite republicanism that voted Democrat for the House. Many of them turned around and voted Republican for the Senate, but they voted Democrat for the House. And the number one issue for them was pre-existing conditions. Barrett puts that issue front and center. And it appears to me, based on the responses to date, the Barrett backers were unprepared for this. Like, I would have had a defense right away. Heck, I would have leaked in advance that I would have had Trump do something on pre-existing conditions on the Friday before he announces Barrett on Saturday. Say something like, no, the president's in control of this. This will have no Obamacare litigation. The
problem with that, though, Robert, is that they have that Justice Department lawsuit. So the problem with it, how could you do that if you, right? So you got Barr.
You really just can't nominate Barrett at that point, because that suit had faded for the most part.
Yeah, it was faded. Yep.
You know, I mean, Trump had done what he did in August to say, don't worry about pre-existing conditions. The problem is Democrats are now going to say that the president won't be able to protect pre-existing conditions if Barrett's on the bench, because she will say such a protection is unconstitutional. And she's also made Bork-like statements about the 14th Amendment. She'd made Bork-like statements about which rights people had or didn't have back at the beginning of her version of originalism looks like Bork's. And for people who don't know, Bork had some interesting statements. Like, I mean, some important. You go back and look. I mean, Bork originally opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He opposed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He considered all of it unconstitutional imposition. And I understand the arguments, but basically he had Barry Goldwater's arguments, folks, as a legal position. And needless to say, that wasn't popular in 1987. How popular do you think any opinion like that is today? I'll give an example. She does a good due process decision in the Purdue sexual assault case. Then she has to volunteer language about how the fact that the assault victim was suicidal and was depressive is really a sign that they should have taken into consideration that she's less credible than normal. That's a stupid statement to make. I mean, they can make a. I guarantee you, preview it right now. A Democratic senator will ask that question during her confirmation hearings. They'll be quoting from it. They'll be quoting from the case where she let cops off for arresting 3 guys for driving while black. They'll pull up a case that she said.
That one's going to happen. That one's coming. You know it is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they'll pull up the case where she said gun rights are originally protected, but voting rights and jury participation rights are not. I mean, the voting rights part, they're going to have a heyday. There's ways to say that. She didn't even have to talk about that. All she had to do in that case was say, gun rights are originalist. That means the Second Amendment limits how you interpret these statutes about felons in possession of firearms. You have to have an additional component to conform to an originalist understanding of the Second Amendment. You don't have to volunteer. By the way, if this was a voting rights case, I'd make clear you can disqualify anyone you want, because we used to do that all the time. There's no need to bring that back. There's no need to mention it. Jury
go ahead. I'm just going to answer some questions, but go ahead. Finish your thought. Go ahead.
So that's it. Just, folks, be prepared. It's going to be an economic assault. It's all going to be policy. It's not going to be personal. There'll be a backstory on social media where they'll put the Handmaid Tale thing in there, not because she's a Catholic, but because she was part of a group that actually called themselves handmaids. But that's only for the social media leftists to get them, up and going. That will not be the Democratic campaign in the Senate. Democratic campaign in the Senate will be she's an extremist. In fact, they'll go out of their way to say how we don't question her religion at all. In fact, our concern is that she is just an ideological extremist who ignores what even a good Catholic would do in these cases. There's already decisions. There's already arguments out there like that. They've already taken apart. I guarantee that, like some people are saying, Barnes, why are you saying this? They're going to pick up on it. Folks, they already got this file. They don't need me to give them this file. They already have it. I was trying to alert conservative Republicans to this file, because the file is already there. It's like when you vet someone before you nominate them. Republicans did not vet her. I have no doubt about it, because they seem sideswiped by the attack. They're all prepared for a Catholic attack, all prepared for a Kavanaugh Thomas personal attack. It was never going to be that way with her. It was always, once she had a whole bunch of decisions and she'd given them all these golden nuggets of statements in those decisions, they were going to let her go the other direction. So
because they see a Feinstein, repeat. That's what that's how they see this stuff, Robert. That's really how they see it. So they were hoping that, like, if Democrats if they make one mistake and it really does hurt, or they know it has the potential to be damaging, then they'll rarely make that other mistake again, unless it's one of their dogma things where they just can't help themselves. But I will say this: there was first I'm going to answer for, I can't remember his name, but whoever asked about the enthusiasm and the turnout if she's defeated, I'll circle back to that. I will. But one of the things that jumped out at me, and I just want to tell people because I've had it on the screen for a while. SSBG is Sunshine State Battleground Poll. Okay. I'm
publicly funded one, right?
Yeah. This is the publicly funded one. It's not totally done yet, folks. There are some things that I want to fill in, but ultimately what I'm saying is the groups have already, with 958 responses, generally most of the core groups have basically, given us their pattern. And, so I will give you the finals. I will tell you Trump is going to be leading in this poll. Okay. And I'll tell you why in a second, guys. I told you Florida, all of you, win or lose. I really do. It would have to be a bloodbath for Trump to lose the state of Florida. And I'm going to show you why, because Florida is close. It's always close, but they tend to like him more than they like other Republicans. That's number one. And number two, he's got an attitudinal appeal that is like weird and unique for this state. And then like Robert was talking about, who comes here to retire. All right. But jumps out right at me again, no matter where we've polled. We've now polled nationally for the Epoch Times. We polled 6 Rust Belt states for the Epoch Times. We polled New Hampshire independently. And then for a client. We've polled Florida now for you guys. And everywhere we poll, Robert, they expect this guy to win. So that's noteworthy because we only have one exception to where that was not as, and in fact, it still isn't really an exception because the polls still showed Hillary would win too. So what I'm talking about is where there was a discrepancy between the polling, the headlines for polls, the voting intention versus the voter expectation, right? And this expectation in Florida is not close. And you can see why. I mean, in almost every age group, and I'm going to show you the vote difference, and I'm going by age here for a reason. Florida's pretty important when it comes to age groups. So seniors overwhelmingly think Trump is going to win. He's doing better among this group, 30 to 44, than he did last time. I'll show you in a second. So it's actually helping to offset some of the slippage we're seeing with seniors, which isn't a huge slip. It's just, it kind of is, but it doesn't matter.
I'm curious about that gap because I just have a strong hunch that seniors are not really good, that he'll do as well as among seniors this time as he did last time.
I think he will too. Right now, they're telling us 9 points, Robert. I think they're full of crap. You want my personal opinion?
Especially if they're one of the groups that's showing up as, in Florida in particular, as a big gap between saying he's going to win versus saying
that's what I was trying to show you. That's
a sign that that's a group that, for whatever reason, feels political pressure, cultural pressure, not to disclose who they're voting for.
He nailed it, guys. That's exactly what I was going to say. So Trump, in 2016, he won seniors by 17 points, 57%. Biden is only about a point or two above where Hillary Clinton won, how many seniors Hillary Clinton won. And of course, the error in this poll, the sampling error, is going to be around 2.1%. So, I mean, it's within reason that he just does. And this changed, by the way. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, seniors were a little bit more iffy. But I told you guys, watch them race back. They do this to me all the time. They did it in 2018 too. They did it in 2016. It wasn't this huge gap in the beginning. And Trump, however, that 30 to 44 age group, he's got almost a 10-point lead with. He lost that age group in 2016. He lost it. And it's noteworthy because I know I'm right, Robert, because they got more Republican. It's like this makeup of these people. And then also that age group has that kind of independent that is drawn to Trump. Even some of the other ones have ran away from him. They're drawn to him because his appeal is attitudinal. It's different, right? And then that 45 to 64, they'll make up a nice chunk of the vote. Trump won them last time by 13 points. That would be the biggest squeeze. That's why this is where it is. But I will tell you, this is, again, one of those things where that's why we have quotas and targets, because they're one of those groups where it's slanted heavily female right now, and they're not religious. It's funny. It'll tell me certain things will tell me that it's not right. So they're not religious, and I know that group is here, right? So I mean, it's just when you start to nest things, then things will pop out at you. And then so we got Trump with a lead of 1 point. The remaining quotas and targets are going to get more pro-Trump. So at first, when I saw that ABC News poll, I was like, I don't know, R+4 during a presidential election. This is R+3. And it's very possible it ekes up to R+4. Either way, and even if it doesn't, what we're saying is that we expect more Trump-leaning independents to come. Right now, they're about tied. Biden's got like a 1 point lead or something. It's nothing. It's not significant. And then Biden gets 1% more of the crossover. That's what happened to him with Hillary. But they're both very low and taking it. The bottom line is here, he does better on some of those trusted with issues questions we were talking about. So he's winning on the economy. This is one state where he is winning with Supreme Court justices, but it's close. And we'll see. But it shouldn't be close because you saw the results of the question I showed you before. The judicial activism versus restraint. Republicans just don't I know they got the media drowning them out, but they don't make their case, man. And I think part of that is because they step into traps sometimes, which you've been just trying to argue for the last hour, right? Like sometimes you just don't want to fight things that are unnecessary to fight. You allow them to distract you with procedural crap and peripheral issues. Like, it's not peripheral to people. Healthcare is important, but that really is not what you wanted to have a confirmation about. He'd much rather talk about abortion on demand or gun rights or things like that. And I don't know why he doesn't embrace more civil liberties stuff after what happened to him personally with the FBI. But this was not the pick for that. If anybody would see the danger in the FISA court, you would think it would be Donald Trump. But apparently not so much, But couple of things, that disparity is huge. You want to see your question, Robert? So Robert suggested this, and we asked how comfortable people were telling them their political beliefs, and we gave them different groups. It was friends, family, because we separated that because you can't choose your family. You can choose your friends. So you could be like-minded with them. So we wanted to separate that. Coworkers, strangers, and then at the very end, I slipped in pollsters. Political pollsters, because I wanted to know, and that's the results of that are important too. But here's Robert's, which was his idea. It was a great idea for a question. Do you believe there is a significant number of shy voters who do not want to share they are voting for Donald Trump? Look at it. I know it's lopsided because I haven't processed it all yet. So no is first, unsure is second, yes is last. Look at that, Robert. 65% of voters in Florida think, oh, of course there is. So this is like out of touch, Nate. So I did this.
Exactly. That all those guys are, because it's just ask the question that everybody's debating. And I was just curious, because this will probably get you the most accurate answer. Whereas people are nervous. Are you probing me? Are you probing what I really think? Are you trying to trick me? Just, scratch through all that and say, do you think these people exist? Because if they don't, then they'll say so. If they do, then you get these kind of results. Where all across the board, they're like, oh yeah, everybody's scared that they're voting for Trump. So it shows you what the social realism is, according to the ordinary voter's perspective.
And 65 plus was, they were all pretty dominant. 18 to 29 was the least likely to say it, but still a pretty large plurality. 20 points, I always hate that word. And then seniors 75 plus, man, 75.6% said there were. And then to their argument, Robert, right? To their argument about, is it, how could they put the yard sign up and not be comfortable? Hang tight with me for 1 second. Let me pull it up. Oh, where is it? We did this on purpose. So do you believe, are you comfortable? And we did talk about Kamala Harris too. So how comfortable or uncomfortable are you telling each group of people about your political beliefs, such as how you intend to vote? Family, and I'm going in order for a reason, right? Yep. So I should really, if we had more time before the show, I would have done this, but across the board, very comfortable. This is completely the reverse. Younger people are the least likely to say very comfortable about family, right? But overall, there still is like 10%, 12%. It's almost 9. It's 9% roughly overall. That's somewhat uncomfortable. And then another 5. That's a very, but watch as we keep going here, right? So that's family. Here's friends. Like I said, you can choose your friends. You can't choose your family. It's starting to tick up a little bit, right? 11%, 6.1%. So even the amounts that say very comfortable are still pretty solid here. Again, though, the young are the least likely to say they are. And then this is the flip side. And then neighbors, right? Now we're starting to see some real numbers here, right? Now we're almost at 30% who say that they're at least somewhat uncomfortable with telling their neighbors. So this gets to the yard sign thing, Robert. My whole point to Nate and Sean Trendy, is that you guys don't understand. There would be more yard signs if were what you're seeing now is the tip of an iceberg. There's probably 30% more. And that's what I'm saying. There would probably be. So what we're seeing here is 3 out of 10 don't want to tell their neighbors who they're voting for. And then coworkers, it's more than 3 in 10. So almost 20, somewhat, very 16. So more, 36, almost 4 in 10. And then here we go. Strangers, right? Strangers now, very uncomfortable, Robert, 27.3%, somewhat 19 point. This is huge. Mm-hmm. This is a huge number of people. This is a big deal. And then pollsters. Here I am. 31%. So you're telling me a third of the damn electorate is uncomfortable to talk with me about their beliefs. And I specifically said, such as how you intend to vote. That's a major problem, Robert. What do you think about those results? That's a major problem for the polling industry.
Oh, I mean, hold on 1 second. Trying to fix that camera, but I can't figure it out. It saved my life.
Yeah, I know. There's these things.
There you go. It'll probably start to sink slowly. But my guess is I think the fact that 2/3 of the state, and I think we'd find comparable numbers in other states, depending on the state, that say that shy Trump voters exist is the biggest answer. And then we see evidence of that further, that at least a third of voters in some capacity feel nervous, and the fact that it shows up with certain demographic groups that are socially sensitive. I think the seniors in Florida are more socially sensitive than seniors in other states because they tend to live in places like the Villages and so forth, where there's really a culture that they're together as seniors. But I think in other locations, it's been it's all the social media groups, younger groups, women groups, that are particularly saying, I don't feel comfortable, or saying that they believe shy Trump voters exist or some version thereof. So I think that we're seeing the demographic. If the hypothesis is shy voters exist because of social media negative attention, if you admitted that you were voting for Trump, and if that was true, what we would expect to see is people saying some version of that, or seeing a gap between people who say they're voting for Biden but think Trump is going to win, disproportionately show up in the most socially sensitive constituencies. And that's precisely what we're seeing disproportionately. And in Florida, it has a different age dynamic because seniors are more socially sensitive, I think, in Florida than other places because of the groups of people that live together as seniors in the state. So I think that's where there's clear evidence. The Florida poll shows and the two things about the Florida poll. First, it shows clear evidence of the shy Trump effect. There's almost every metric you would use to try to measure whether that exists says, yes, it exists. And again, 2/3 of the state says it exists. Yeah. And then the other component is this a good baseline pre-Barrett? And that's
what I was hoping to get it.
Yeah, because it will stay stable, I think, more in Florida than some other states. But the Barrett effect will be felt in a week or two. And just briefly on some comments or questions people had, I think there's a 2/3 chance that Barrett does not blow up on Trump. I'm just saying there's a 1 in 3 chance it does, and that's why I'm reducing Trump.
Yeah, explain that to people. Like, people are like, is it possible that it could hurt their enthusiasm? And Democrats do have a habit of doing this because young people, their feelings get hurt easy and they feel defeated easy. I know it's funny to say, but it is true. So like, if she gets confirmed, Robert, can it hurt them? I mean, the obvious answer there is she won't be confirmed probably by then. Maybe, I don't know. But
I think 2 different components. So the risk that it blows up in some capacity, because either she goes through and it makes the presidential electoral dynamic very bad, no matter what happens to whether she gets confirmed or not. About a 1 in 3 chance of that happening. And that's why I reduced Trump from 75% chance he's going to win to 50%, because that's how that 1/3 plays out. That still means I think there's a 2/3 chance it does not blow up in Trump's face. So just so people are clear on that. And then the second component in terms of her confirmation, right? I guess there's 3 questions. The second question, confirmation, I still assess that as a little better than 50-50 that she gets confirmed. I was when I said, people ask, well, you said she was high risk. What I meant by high risk was with Lagoa, it was 95% chance.
There's no risk. Yeah.
And there was only a 5% chance she blows up the election. So what I meant by is that she was much higher risk, but that doesn't mean she's 90% chance she doesn't get confirmed. I think that's 50-50 because it's going to be hard for a lot of Republicans, and we'll transition into this conversation about the Senate. It'll be hard for them to say no because without antagonizing their base this close to the election. And though they got a tough, in states like Colorado and Maine, they got a tough, narrow little space to crawl between. And the third aspect in terms of if she gets confirmed, here's my view. If she's not confirmed, net plus to Trump. And the reason for that is the Republican vote will be enraged. The Democrat vote will be satiated.
That's an interesting take.
So that's my takeaway on that, because here's the thing, folks, Biden can't get them out. They have to come out for some other reason. And if they already won without having to come out to vote, well, I can go home, just chill out, smoke some pot, do some weed. That's a consumer millennial population, folks. I'm not speaking for myself, just in case anybody.
I'm just saying.
I'm sure it'll show up in some form of meme someplace. But but I think whereas I guarantee, but what it will be true is religious conservatives will be enraged if she goes down like they were after Bork. So, when Bork went down in 1988, religious conservative turnout was a lot better than secular left turnout. Now, there was about a year delay there, but Bork has been an obsessive discussion, a conversation amongst religious conservatives for 30 plus years until somehow the political class forgot about it for Barrett. But putting that aside for the moment, so I think the net effect of her going down would probably benefit Trump net. And so if that's why I'm in a wait and watch mode. If it turns out she doesn't blow up, no big deal. I'm betting Trump and Republicans across the board. If it turns out she does blow up, I'm waiting to see whether she gets confirmed or denied, because I think net plus if she gets denied. If she gets confirmed, it probably is net plus for the Democrats. If we use Kavanaugh in the swing states as a proxy. Now, it's a loose proxy. It's not a perfect proxy. But Democrats in the Senate, gubernatorial races, and most of the House races, not all, in all of the Midwestern swing states, aside from Ohio, did better they did a lot better than Republicans in those areas in 2018 compared to 2016. So if to the degree that's a foreshadow, say again.
I didn't even look at that. I mean, I looked at the raw data in this for the generic ballot, but I didn't look at the generic ballot once the weights were in place. We can do that live right now, but somebody asked a great question. You want to answer it?
Sure.
I mean, typically, historically, my answer would be no. I'll let Robert rock on this one, but I put it up because we're showing you see that question right there?
Yeah, we already know, folks. Does Biden enthusiasm plus anti-Trump enthusiasm cancel Trump enthusiasm? No, that's why he's down 6 points amongst registered voters in the Midwest in the Rust Belt poll that Richard did, but he's up eight amongst extremely enthusiastic. And if you think, oh, maybe that extremely enthusiastic is some tiny slice of the electorate. No, it's more than half. So the enthusiasm gap is massive for Trump. Massive. You're talking
see that
30, 40 point gaps. So, and what, a theory of mine that I've been saying forever, Richard's been talking about it. Love conquers hate in politics.
Yep. And look at this.
Counter a lot of narratives, but I've been betting on that since I was 14 years old. So, and have never lost on that comp. If you just knew the enthusiasm gap, you could predict the winner in every single election, period.
And you can see it here, Robert. They don't like Biden. They don't like him. When 3/4 of your voters say that, oh, I'm saying I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, and 3/4, but I'm only doing so because I don't like his opponent. This is what Mitt Romney had. And then even when you ask the question a little bit differently, like traditional enthusiasm, it did look in some polls that Republicans had an enthusiasm juice, but it didn't show up. And in truth, it never played out. And who was enthusiastic? Black voters. And they, for the first time ever, voted at a higher rate than whites, specifically, by the way, black women fueled that. And they came out to defend their guy. And it just never panned out. Even in some of these polls that were showing, Romney +1, Gallup, Romney +1, Rasmussen, some state polls that showed, maybe Romney could take Virginia. I mean, it was ridiculous. That was not going to happen. It never was. And that's what happens when you do that. And by the way, look at the shy vote and no opinion for Trump. That's another shy right there. Just like 10 points at least, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and some of these third-party voters are clearly parking their vote, I think, because I don't think they're going to get collectively 5, 6, 7% of the national vote. Now, I think some of them are parking their vote undecided. I have a little sister that's that way. She right now would probably say Green Party, but she's actually undecided.
Crossing right now. How many people said undecided, but then also gave us what we're calling not positive because it's positive or negative. We mean they're positive responses about the shy questions, which means they believe it or they have a connection to it. And then they also approve of Trump. And then somehow, though, on the preference question, they're undecided. So there's a couple of things we're looking at. And right now, she thinks it's good for at least 2 points. I mean, we'll go through that. But I'm saying I wouldn't be shocked if he took Florida by 3 points. I wouldn't, because I think, Rob, there's just clearly people who are just not willing. His approval rating is strong here, by the way. It's strong. And they're just not willing to say, So that was a really good question. Actually, let's look at the ballot. Let's look at the generic ballot, man. I didn't look at it weighted. Where are you, generic ballot? All right, and this is a thing that I had personally against. I said myself, I think the Silver and the rest of them were unfairly criticizing Rasmussen with the House vote. However, they kind of brought it on themselves because they asked a question, very convoluted, very obfuscated way. You really did not. Between the House.
They stuck with the method that Scott Rasmussen came up with. And he's no longer there. And for decades, he'd always just asked the Congress question, not the House or the Senate question. And it never used to matter because they used to vote in conjunction. And they just didn't in 2020. 2018.
Yeah, there was no ticket splitting going on. So, in the era of Obama, that was nil. That had become almost nil. But we ask it a different way. We say, if the elections for the U.S. House of Representatives in your congressional district were held today, for which party candidate would you vote? There is no getting confused. We are talking about the House of Representatives in your district. And let's take a look. Actually, okay. So it's a 3-even Republican lead. I want to say this, though. I saw this in 2016, and in the end, it didn't pan out everywhere, man. So again, what I'm saying is Laura's probably right. Now that you hear what? Because she's saying, looking at the numbers and crossing. So do you approve of Trump, right? Are you giving us a positive response on whether you believe in the shy vote or you are uncomfortable expressing your political views, right? About Trump, because the questions were about specifically Donald Trump and who you intend to vote for president, right? Look at the difference. It's a 3-point lead for the Republican candidate. It's a 1-point lead for Donald Trump. Laura's saying it's a 2-point. She thinks it's 2 points. Hand to God, folks. That is the first time I looked at the generic ballot weighted. It doesn't really matter what's said in the raw. There's no way to discern, So she may be right. She may be on.
And we are seeing a gap, because my own view is that Trump will run ahead of the generic of the House vote. In 2016 was totally different. People were still making distinctions, et cetera. I think 2020 is going to be party line Trump up and down for the most part. Little differences here and there. But I think the net effect of it is going to be that I think you're right, because for the last 6 weeks or so, there's been a gap where the Republican candidate's been running ahead of Trump in a range of states and national polls. The USC poll, which, by the way, if the USC poll has the same bias it had in 2018, Republicans are leading the generic ballot. It's only down to, it's down to 6 points, folks, and they overstated the Democratic vote in 2018 by 7 points.
Robert, why was it warranted to change their methodology when they overstated Trump by 4, but it is not warranted to change their methodology when they overstated Democrats by 7? All right. Yeah. So, folks, you see the con here. I'm sorry, man. I'm done playing games. This is a freaking con. All right. It's so sad to watch, though, too, because then you get all the cute little things like Biden's lead is bigger than Hillary's. Well, right. But if the polling era is bigger because their problems are getting worse like that, right? Then you would expect that. Now, when all I can do is show you what we found. I know this state, Robert. He's ahead. I'm telling you, he's ahead.
No doubt about it. In fact, and so I think it'll be. I think Florida, he'll be okay. He'll stay close, but I don't think he'll take a hit. Aside from maybe on enthusiasm, but the kind of the target audience for everybody out there, that if you want to filter out how they're going to attack Barrett, aside, that they'll hit all of their core constituencies and touch all of those issues in terms of feminist, Black Lives Matter, et cetera. They'll probably do more about race issues than normal, solely to try to gin up African-American turnout. They'll probably do some stuff about some of her decisions on immigration to try to gin up immigrant-sensitive Democratic voter groups, which is not all of the Hispanic vote, contrary to conventional wisdom. But I think their main target is working class women in the North. So that's where a lot about pre-existing conditions. Working class non-evangelical women in the North are not pro-life generally. They're socially, like, if you put them between the extremes, they would lean pro-life, but they don't want the state banning abortion altogether, or the state really controlling their lives in that way. And they're generally lapsed. If they're religious, they're lapsed religious. They tend not to be observant. So they're like the cultural evangelicals of the South, or they're lapsed Catholics. They tend to often have issues, frankly, with the Catholic Church, more so than praise of the Catholic Church. The days of Catholics voting for someone because they're Catholic has been gone really since 1960. 1960 is the only time that really happened. It's been fading ever since. Once they felt accepted, and also they've been abandoning the church in record numbers for the last 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Florida, by the way, the percentage, I think it was, we went over this poll on this show, right? We went over there's more Protestant and Hispanics this year. Yeah. We actually are seeing that in the raw. Absolutely came in the raw. Because if you just make sure, guys, like I always say, you get your age, your gender, your geo, you get the basics correctly, you don't really have to play around with stuff like other pollsters play. You shouldn't have to. And it will tell you those trends. And there's no doubt that there's more Protestant Hispanics than we saw last go. Right. And so 2 years ago.
It looks like I'm gonna have to hop off here in about 5 minutes. I got to do a call at 4.
That's all right. It's already almost 4 anyway. So get out what you think you need to get out.
Sure. So two things. One is so right now it's wait and watch on all bets. I'm not condemning Barrett in terms of saying no chance. I think just the opposite, 2/3 chance it doesn't blow up. 60% chance she gets nominated, 50 to 6, somewhere in that realm. And it goes to this, and that's where my bets are for the House and the Senate. Same, wait and watch. For the Senate, this is going to be, I don't know how Collins walks the line. I assume Collins almost has to be a no vote, but and maybe she uses the iconoclast of, hey, I'm back to independent Susan Collins voting no to get reelected, but it's going to hurt her with the Trump base. So it's getting more of the independents in Maine then she loses enthusiasm in the Trump base. And because I think they're doing the Senate election ranked choice too. So that may help her, because there may be Trump voters that are mad at her if she votes no, but she's their second choice after some third party choice. So I think, but right now I'm same thing, watching wait mode. I thought Collins was going to win. I thought the polling was, if you looked really at the polling, she's running 6 to 7 points ahead of Trump there.
She may be in trouble though now. I mean,
really. Now she's back into trouble because I don't know how she walks this rope. Gardner in Colorado, I'm not sure how he walks the rope. Because again, it's a pro-choice leaning state. He's up against it. He's an underdog, but maybe he uses voting against Barrett to prove his independent bona fides that win back some of those ex-moderate Republicans that are now leaning Democrat, and he wins Colorado and Denver.
Maybe.
But he has to do it without upsetting the Colorado Springs religious conservative vote. In Arizona, same dynamic with McSally, though that's more of a real mixed vote, and her weakness has always been Trump voters, so antagonizing them again may be counterproductive. But maybe she proves her independence, tries to do, hey, I'm really the next John McCain, but I'm not without all the baggage of McCain somehow. In other words, I have that independent streak that Goldwater and McCain had, that Arizona voters like, without being losing a lot of the Trump core vote. And then I think Murkowski is just mercurial. So I think she'll vote no because she made a pre-promise 2016 that she would never vote for a presidential. She would not vote for a judicial nomination. There, no confirmation until inauguration. line. It tells you, by the way, they've been testing this. You don't come up with a Johnny Cochran line overnight, not the Democratic Party anymore. They're not rooted in that rhetorical tradition anymore, unless you've tested it. But she sort of committed to that in 2016, so I think she'll use that as her excuse. And then folks were at 50-50 in the Senate. If those 4 senators vote no, because it looks like all the Democrats are going to be lockstep. So that means now I think Romney will hold, but I don't think Democrats will get a 5th vote. I think that will hold and they'll win. Pence will be the deciding vote. So
First
that's
time ever. First time ever. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, this is a lot of first time evers. If you're in the election forecasting polling business, this is where you make your medal, because this is the toughest election to forecast I have ever seen, read, or studied. And I'm looking at all Americans.
Very difficult, Robert. I mean, that's why I'm happy we at least have not so far. Maybe that'll change. But in 2016, everything was mine. I felt so comfortable because I collected it all. We're starting to get there now. I don't know what the Epoch Times is going to do, but maybe they fell $500 shy with this poll. I mean, that's it. Really, I can flip. So I mean, if they continue to do this, then I'll poll other states. But Florida's very, very important. It's very important.
No doubt. And it reflects a lot of what voter constituencies in other parts of the country are going to do because of how Florida's made up. 3 voter groups I'm interested in, if you do a subsample once everything is done, the Panhandle, because like I said, there's some weird numbers. I think he's doing better in the Panhandle. There are some polls showing him weaker. The second is the Space Coast. I'm really curious about the Space Coast. And then the third are older Cubans over 45. How much are they really coming back to Trump? Because they deviated a little bit in 2016.
We did, this is how we broke it down. We did a little bit different than the exit polls, but we could combine some areas and make it like the exit polls. It's just that the exit polls are a little bit too oversimplified for us. We like to break it down into
and frequently the exit polls, folks don't know, they get their internals wrong a lot. So they're a useful metric, but not a perfect metric. I would be curious about though, because I think those are the groups that are trending more pro-Trump. If you looked at voter registration files, that's what was showing up. That outside of certain parts of Miami, which were trending Democratic, parts of Puerto Rican Orlando and Puerto Rican Tampa that were trending Democratic in voter registration. Basically, the whole rest of the state is trending Republican. And in my favorite little county, Dixie County up north, was almost double-digit switch. Almost home there in Dixie County. They're on the water, but not quite like the water like everybody else is on. So I'm just curious where that's heading, because that will tell me where the populist vote, just the way sort of Monroe and Macomb in Michigan and Erie in Pennsylvania and where Little Rochester is, not Rochester, New York, but Rochester, Minnesota is, tells me a lot about those states, more than even the overall polling will. I'm very curious about those 3 groups within Florida, because if they're trending more pro-Trump in 2016, he's still going to hold Florida no matter what happens with Barrett. Then the battleground shifts I think he's going to hold Arizona. That's starting to show up. The battleground shifts to the working class north. It's all about Maine to Minnesota and what's in between.
Told you I was skeptical of that, Robert. Sinema pulled off an amazing feat, and it took a lot to get her there. I just, I would be shocked. It's going to be close, but I would be shocked.
No doubt. Just because there's more Mexican-American voters, it's one of the only states that's trending Democrat overall in voter registration. But Republicans came with a lead. It started with a 6-point Trump-oriented cushion from 2016 compared to the national vote. So I thought it would move, but it wasn't moving 6 points to the Democrats in that time. And remember, 2018, Arizona was very competitive. Republicans easily won the governor's seat, and were very competitive in the Senate seat with a very, very, very weak candidate.
Yeah, we broke this down just so we will be able to do that. We broke this down in 6 regions, really, but because we wanted to separate the Panhandle from North Central Florida, and the exit polls don't do that. They're like Panhandle, North Florida, right? And that includes
North Central Florida. You can end up with a bunch of excess votes from Tallahassee, if you extend it far enough, from Gainesville.
That's right.
A bunch of votes that are not at all the Panhandle.
That's right, and they do that. So like Alachua and Bradford are together with your Dixie and Hernando, and then Hernando's in there. Robert's ridiculous. So we did
Duval County, and then it's totally skewered.
It's right, right. And by the way, we're going to look specifically at that because there's been a lot of talk from Biden's camp about how well he's doing there. We'll see. Yeah,
But I looked at voter registration. I thought it was pretty even. So
yeah,
at least voter registration is not. It's in the just because all the urban centers are becoming a little bit minority because of demographics. You're going to have a slight democratic shift in those areas. Now in Orlando and Tampa, it's because of the Puerto Ricans. Miami, just because it's heavily ethnic already, and just keeps trending in that direction. But the whole rest of the state, including in Jacksonville, was leaning, I thought, just a little bit Democratic. But that's why I think Jacksonville, Duval County is not going to dictate the vote. It's what's south of Duval. It's that's Space Coast. For those people who don't know, like places like Daytona Beach were trending heavy Republican in voter registration. I have fondness of Daytona Beach because I vacationed and relaxed there for 2 weeks after the Snipes trial. So it was almost all
coming out of Ocala, right?
Yep, exactly. Just hopped right over there. Went over to Celebration first and did the whole like fake Disney World kind of thing with the fake city, but I thought it was cool. Then hopped over, went to Ybor City before that for the Super Bowl. Then boom to Daytona Beach for 2 weeks to really relax because it's one of the last great blue collar beaches left in America.
We're going to show people how we did it because there's, for people who don't know, there's like 11 regions that Florida breaks itself down by. And we can, so region 1 and 2 is the Panhandle. Regions 3 and 4 is North Central Florida. And it's the exit polls are oversimplified. And we kept Orlando with parts of the Atlantic coast. Then we took the Tampa Bay area out separately. That's that area. And Tampa Bay area is nothing more than Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough. All right. And then Southeast Gold Coast, and then Southwest Mid-Florida, Monroe, and the rest of it. And I'm telling you, it's weird.
You're clearly right about Collier and those other counties. Those counties are trending towards Trump.
Heavily. They are. I mean, it really kind of stunned how some of these things shook out. Right. So that's why I'm glad I separated the Panhandle specifically, because the exit polls, they won't do it. They'll be like the Panhandle, North Florida, 20%, kind of. It's just not granular enough. You really can't know that. And then you have to know which each county, share. Yeah, you may need to break out of here, Robert. Guys, follow Robert. We'll see you next week, Robert. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Follow Robert, everybody, at Barnes_law. I'm glad he had a chance to, I just kind of sit back and let him do the talking because he's been taking a beating on Twitter, over this with Barrett, and how obviously he thought it would be better to go with Lagoa. I'll say this, guys, there are a lot of unprecedented things going on. I mean, crazy, that has never been seen in the history of election forecasting. So, it's going to be a wild ride, but I can tell you, we will wrap up Florida soon. When I tell you that there are preliminary results, I mean, I'll just look, things could change, but I wouldn't be shocked if Trump's lead in this poll really just go to 2 or 3. And because of some of this other stuff, it just needed more men. It was not religious enough. And then inside that, it was actually slightly too Catholic, which helped Trump because he's winning the Catholic vote, but way less Protestant. And by the way, Protestants, they exhibit quite a bit of social bias. So if you have no religion, then you don't care about, expressing your views. Trump is doing better among people who have no religion. I was actually a little bit shocked by that. So it's just some strange things that we're seeing in the numbers this year. That is really crazy. I mean, really nuts. And I will say Florida, certain things about Florida just look better for Trump than we polled nationally. We polled the Rust Belt. So that's why you really got to hit on trade and issues like that in the Rust Belt, because this is where people, they really, they favor Trump's position, and that is what gets him the crossover in those areas. But in a state like Florida, it's totally different. Look, so I'm just looking at the raw as it's coming in. So clearly, it really nothing would shift dramatically at this point that would change the overall result, which is that people want in Florida, voters in Florida want Judge Amy Coney Barrett to get a hearing in the Senate. That's number one, a very big result that is different from the national polls. Jumped right at it. Judicial restraint is overwhelmingly favored by Florida voters. So in other words, why did I ask that? Why does that matter? They don't agree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They don't agree with her philosophy. They may, revere her for what she was in life, but they don't agree with her philosophy on the bench. End of story. They also oppose adding more seats to the Supreme Court. That's another one. Trump's lead on the economy is rather large. Biden leads on healthcare. Biden leads on coronavirus, but get this, now less than he does on healthcare. Trump leads on policing, crime, and safety. And in fact, those who chose policing, crime, and safety as the top issue or ranked it, because we'll have ranked distribution scores as well. He is clobbering Joe Biden with that. In Florida, different than we found elsewhere. But then again, the issue wasn't as important. So let's see. Trump leads on Supreme Court appointments, which is interesting. He leads on immigration. Biden leads on education. Trump leads, which is an issue Republicans should really do more to get out in front of, because Democrats have kind of won on education by default recently. Trump has a rather big lead on terrorism and national security. Probably shouldn't surprise anybody. Nationally, he doesn't, but which is, I know, surprised me a little bit too, but media coverage, who knows? I don't know. I just gather it. But I would say this. In Florida, it's more heavily veteran. It's more, second, I believe the second largest number of veterans in the state, right? So and that's a pretty big lead, actually. Biden, of course, he leads, no shocker here, environment and climate change and race relations. Do you support or oppose calls to defund the police? And we'll have this all, and I'll send a report out for you guys. This is your poll. This is your poll. We'll go over it more on Inside the Numbers tomorrow. Don't forget, I have an interview with the Hill TV tomorrow, and then another quick 10 or 15 minute radio slot. Inside the Numbers starts at 11, and we'll have more openly about this poll. I mean, not openly, but it's as open as you can get, opening up market site. But I mean, we'll be able to look at details of the poll more than we have here. Oppose or support calls to defund the police? Not even close. Overwhelming. This is something that scares me and has for a while now. If state and local officials, we asked this question in Florida too. If state and local officials mail unsolicited ballot requests or ballots to everyone on the voter rolls, how much would you trust the integrity of the election result? Folks, the state of Florida is split on whether they trust this election. Half of the damn state either has not very much or none at all when it comes to the integrity of this election. You cannot survive as a self-governing society if half of the electorate, half of the population, doesn't believe in the integrity of the results. We cannot take another one of these, all right? Actually, much closer on whether to add Senate seats for Washington, D.C., much closer than I thought, but still opposed, and that is because there's a very large number of undecideds, okay? Also, in this, I would just say this tends to be the case in media polls. We have a way that we iron it out a little bit. Puerto Ricans are not the biggest Hispanic voting group in the state of Florida. They tend to be overrepresented, which can skew a lot of the overall top line results. All right. And we'll show you that tomorrow too. How comfortable or uncomfortable are you with Kamala Harris being the president if Joe Biden, here, let me get this because this is weighted. We do have this here. Where are you? Where are you? This is how, there she is. All right. So here we go. And we'll keep it by age. All right. Load up. Hurry up. We asked them like this. Just so because people are going to be like, oh my God, how could you ask what? Because you guys wanted me to ask it. And I worded it the correct way. There was a read-in. So, by the way, this conducted multi-mode and multi-language. Okay. Joe Biden, 77, called himself a transition candidate. And both he and Kamala Harris have made headlines recently using the term Harris administration instead of Biden administration. If elected, Biden would replace Donald Trump, 74, as the oldest president to serve. How comfortable or uncomfortable would you be with Kamala Harris as president if Joe Biden was elected but could not serve out his term? Okay. And you guys, you can't see that here. I'll give you a little scoot in. That's quite a bit of who say that they are somewhat uncomfortable. Where's the other one? I must have shrunk it down. Where are you? It's not particularly good at all. All right. So I must have, and when I put this together, I left the other one out. But I can give you the raw and tell you what it says. So very comfortable in the raw, which is like D2 or 3 now, about 38%. Somewhat comfortable, about 18%. But another 3 and 10 were somewhat uncomfortable, and about 15% were very uncomfortable. All right. So, when 43% of the raw electorate thinks that perhaps, it's not good if your running mate takes over, there may be some. Why we ask this is because I'm wondering if there are some people who are not going to tell us that they think about this as an issue. Okay. And if so, that could take us all by surprise a little bit. Even if elections are always decided on the margins, even if it's just a little bit, we're just talking about 2%, 3%. You could have an enormous impact in a state as close to Florida. All right. And then again, big takeaways. Is your vote for or against opponent? That's a big deal. A big deal. So Trump's approval is a little bit above water. It's about 51-48 for those who didn't see it. I'm just trying to give you guys the recap before we go. And then ultimately the recap by age, it's Trump by about 1 point. And I wouldn't be shocked if this lead grows to 2. We'll see. All right. So where that is 958 responses. And we were looking, trying to shoot for like, if we get 1,100, then we know we're generally in the vicinity. Okay. Because I'm going to oversample Hispanics. Puerto Ricans will come in a lot faster, especially you have to give in Florida. Got to give the option for multiple languages, especially on the phone. All right. And you can't translate something over the phone. Right. So people have to know how to do it, have to know how to give the questionnaire in another language. Puerto Ricans are about 16% of Florida Hispanics. Okay. In truth, Cubans are 26, Colombians 18, Mexicans 11, Dominicans 5, Guatemalans 22, other Hispanic origin 22%. That's a little bit old. Actually, those stats are a little bit old. And then Venezuelans now, for those of you, we talked about this before, they're about probably rough, 47,000 eligible voters in Miami-Dade that are Venezuelan. People are like, it's not that big of a deal. Well, if there's 50 by the election day, 52, whatever it may be, they're breaking for Trump by 72%. It was, by the way, when we only had a handful of them, it was about 80. They're breaking for Trump overwhelmingly. And, the bottom line is, do the quick math, guys. In a state that could be decided by 5 digits, tens of thousands of votes, like we saw with Rick Scott, like we saw with Ron DeSantis, that would be a big deal, and we will. Y-Town, absolutely. Let me throw that up. We are. I did that on purpose because I wanted to show you guys. We'll break them down, get them by zip code. They have to be crossed by zip. And then we always ask them to self-report, but you would be shocked, guys, how many people don't might give something that's I'm the Gold Coast, aren't I? And then especially when you're looking to the certain areas where just above Palm Beach, you're out of that region again. So we cross it, but we will show that to you. All right, I'll have that for you by tomorrow because just peeking at it, some of the things were a little bit funny. So in truth, Biden does look like he's doing a little bit better in North Florida, but Trump is doing better in South Florida. So some of it's just crazy. It's just nuts. And look, Gamer says, I lie to mainstream pollsters because they don't deserve the truth. Apparently, again, a lot of you agree with that because, how comfortable, here's pollsters right here. And then I'm going to break and bug out, but we started late. So I'm trying to carry it for another couple of minutes after Robert went. So somewhat comfortable, somewhat uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, very comfortable, very uncomfortable. And I didn't order these correctly. Market site will take it. And as it gets that answer, it'll give it in the order. not by how much responses you do that later. That's why processing data can take so much time for us. It's not just the math, it's the physical look of this stuff to make it look nice, and readable, legible, right? Human digestible, I say, right? Somewhat comfortable is 24%, somewhat uncomfortable, almost 16%, and then very uncomfortable, almost 17%. So, folks, a third of likely voters in this poll said they are at least somewhat uncomfortable telling a pollster their political beliefs, such as how they intend to vote. We did this on purpose because the arguments we heard were rather ludicrous. The point being, look at neighbors. All right? 17.5% somewhat uncomfortable. Again, about 3 in 10. Just about, almost on the money. Or at least slightly uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable, if not very uncomfortable, about their neighbors knowing their political beliefs, how they intend to vote. So people are like, I don't buy this shy thing because, if they put a yard sign out, why wouldn't they tell a pollster? Well, you can now, yourself, you see the difference between telling a neighbor how you're going to vote, which is still not great, and telling a perfect stranger or a pollster. There's a difference. And my point, that argument was flawed for 2 reasons. So I'm not at all shocked to see this. You have to have a little bit of common sense to foreshadow something like this. But the argument is you would see more signs. That's what they're missing. You would actually see more signs. And then the second element of what they are missing, of course, is that people view different people in different groups differently. They're much more comfortable telling their friends than they are neighbors or coworkers or strangers or pollsters. All right? And even still, the percentage of those who aren't comfortable is enormous. And while I'm polling Florida, I'm thinking of this guy, and I'll take this out with this. In Micanopy, for those of you who know Florida, it's a historic business district. That town has been around forever. And they have little antique stores. They have little bath and body stores, little weapon stores, cafes, 2 cafes. It's a place where people go and look at there was one of the cafes in 2016 was just off the chain for Trump. They had the flag up on the pole. Their flag was in front of the glass. Then more signs. There's like 3 signs in the patio where you can sit and eat. This time, we spoke to this guy again because we had spoken to him in 2016. Now, I've been there multiple times myself to speak to them. And he said all of that stuff is down with the exception now. I think he recently put up one little one, but they're afraid they're going to get bricked through the windows. This is rural Florida. This isn't like downtown, Miami-Dade. This is rural Florida. And they're afraid some Black Lives Matter, BLM, or Antifa guy or girl, some group is going to be even passing through and they'll chuck a sign at them. A brick through the door at the sign. So I think some of this it doesn't surprise me what we found, but it does show you how big the disconnect it is between some of these pundits and the people that are in everyday America, average middle America, whether they're on the right or the left. And that's fundamentally a problem because predicting elections is the same as trying other, models of trying essentially to predict human behavior. How could you possibly do that if you're not at all familiar with the people that you're trying to forecast? It's impossible. It's highly, highly unlikely. So that leaves you to rely on being a glorified poll reader, no fancy algorithms. All right. We all know that's a sham. All right. And that's why you're either right if the polls are right or you're wrong if the polls are wrong, because you're not really a forecaster and you really don't know the subject of your work. So there you have it. All right. It's 4:25. A couple little show announcements. All right. Tomorrow, I will be on. Let me get them for you. All right. Quite frankly, by the way, I'll be on at, looks like 7:20. So pre-debate appearances will be, yes, quite frankly, at 7:30. My good buddy Frank. All right. For those of you who've never saw that show, great show. They booted him off YouTube for having the nerve to talk about coronavirus outside of the spectrum, I think that's what happened. And then I'll also, and I'll tweet all this out, at 8 o'clock, right before the debate starts, it's 5 o'clock California time, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'll be on a radio station with in Fresno, California. All right. So if you guys are out there in Fresno, then you'll see me. What else? Let's see. Because you guys are stunned, like, do these interviews in regions of the country, and like, oh, I heard you on so-and-so. All right. So I'll shoot it out and the Hill tomorrow, but that is taped. So I think, that will be released another time. I'll get you that, but I'll tweet them out. You know how it goes. Here's the schedule for the week. Don't miss it if you can. If you can, check it out. Great. All right. And then, tomorrow it'll start inside. My voice is done. It is 11 o'clock. Inside the Numbers starts at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Okay. Don't forget 11 a.m., not 10 a.m. Okay. Don't forget. So basically we'll go over the Sunshine State Battleground Poll in a lot more detail, even if it's not totally done and trickled in. It's important to me to collect responses over time. So you do not want to miss people because you polled when everybody was at church on Sunday. You don't want to miss people because you polled while working people were still at work. You have to space it out over time. All right. I am a big believer in that. All right. But for the most part, we'll have general idea like we did today. So we'll be able to say, okay, here's the prelim results. This is the way it's going to be. I'll tell you right now, nothing is going to change substantially that it's not going to be anywhere between the Trump 1 to 3 point lead. All right. 3 would be a big lead. It would be a big lead. But if he's going to win Catholics by some of the margins going to win, then that makes help to explain, because it's not. That's why I want to show you guys region like the question before, because it's really not concentrated in like Pasco and Pinellas. I mean, he's got, obviously the president has support there too, but I'm saying the change is not concentrated in those areas where there are white, like Italians and Catholics. That's not what it is. It's stunningly doing much better in the Orlando area. I'll show you. We'll go over it tomorrow. So again, interesting. Don't forget, Inside the Numbers starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. I'm going to take it out with the Grammy-considered Bowen Band. Thanks, everyone, for watching. What are the odds with Barnes and Baris? We will talk about what else to do with polling. Maybe we will put up that map and see if you want to do New Hampshire, Maine, whatever. We'll tell you what's left, in there before we do that. If that's the way, there's like a discrepancy. But if you want to contribute, it's down in the link in the YouTube, paypal.me/People's Pundit. Either we'll put up a map or we'll make you guys vote on it if you want to keep going or not. But that's up to you guys. We'll decide from there. All right. I'm kicking rocks, guys. I'm kicking rocks. Thanks for watching. All the best. We'll see. Do not miss out tomorrow. Do not. You'll want to check it out. All right. All the best, folks. All the best.
Shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway. Restless nights, coffee houses, buzzing neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting it. Overdrive from town to town, and in between I see you in the morning light.